You ever think you know someone, like really know them, only to find out everything you believed was a lie? That's exactly what happened to me with my sister. I spent nearly a year supporting her, thinking I was helping, but there was a whole side of her I never saw. And, well, it hit me in the middle of a family dinner, of all places. Stick around, because this story gets messy, and honestly, you won't see the twists coming. By the way, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to know. So, to really understand what happened, you kind of have to go back to the beginning, because this didn't just happen overnight. It built up slowly, almost quietly. For 11 months, I was paying for my sister Monica's entire life. And I don't mean helping out here and there, I mean everything. Her rent, her utilities, even her groceries. Every single month, like clockwork. I had this separate account just for her expenses, and it felt, I don't know, responsible, I guess. Like I was doing the right thing. She had just gone through a messy divorce, said she had nothing left, no savings, no backup plan, nothing. I remember her showing up at my door with trash bags full of clothes, crying so hard she could barely breathe. And in that moment, there wasn't really a choice. You know, she was my sister, and my dad had passed a few years earlier. Before he died, he made me promise I'd take care of her. He always said she wasn't as strong as me, and I carried that with me, like every single day. So, yeah, I stepped in. At first, it felt right, like I was holding the family together. But over time, it started to wear on me. I was working insane hours, 14-hour days, sometimes trying to keep up with my own responsibilities and still cover everything for her. I'd skip vacations, put off buying things for myself, cut corners wherever I could. Meanwhile, Monica, well, she always had a reason she couldn't work. Some new stress, some health issue, something emotional. And I believed her. Every time. But then there were these little things. Tiny details that didn't quite add up. Like, she'd say she was struggling, but then I'd notice her hair looked freshly done. Not just trimmed like professionally colored, styled, expensive. Or she'd mention therapy and need extra money. But somehow she always had a new outfit or the latest phone, stuff like that. And I'd notice it, sure, but I'd brush it off. I mean, who wants to think their own sister is taking advantage of them? Right. Anyway, all of this kind of came to a head at my mom's birthday dinner. It was one of those crisp autumn evenings, the kind that usually feels comforting. The house smelled like garlic bread and roasted chicken. My mom always cooked way too much food, like she was feeding a small army instead of 3 people. But that night, the atmosphere felt off, heavy, like the air itself was thick. I was exhausted, not just tired, like deep, bone-level exhausted, the kind where your whole body just feels drained. And I remember sitting there at the table, trying to stay present, but my mind kept drifting. Monica was sitting across from me, and honestly, she looked amazing. That's what struck me first. Her skin was glowing. Her hair was this perfect honey blonde, freshly done I could tell, and she was wearing this silk blouse that definitely wasn't cheap. It all just felt wrong, somehow, because this was the same person who, just days before, had told me she was barely getting by. She picked up the wine I had brought and took a sip, then kind of smiled and said, "This is decent, Alice. A bit dry for my taste, but it works." And I don't know why, but that comment stuck with me. Maybe it was the tone, casual, light. No hint of the emotional weight she usually carried when she talked to me one-on-one. No trembling voice, no tears, just normal. I remember just kind of nodding and saying, "It's $40 a bottle," which, for me, was a bit of a splurge. And she just shrugged like it was nothing. Across the table, my mom was beaming. She kept looking between us, clearly relieved that things seemed calm. She always wanted us to get along, to be close again. She said something like, "It's so nice having everyone together," and then turned to Monica, telling her how much better she looked. And Monica, she played the part perfectly. She sighed, reached for my mom's hand, and said something about how hard everything had been, how she was just taking it one day at a time, how depression was a battle. And I sat there listening, feeling this weird tension building in my chest, because part of me believed her, or wanted to. But another part of me was starting to notice the performance, like the timing of her sigh, the way her voice softened just enough. It felt rehearsed. And I hated that I was even thinking that. At one point, my mom asked if Derek was coming. Derek was this guy Monica said was just a friend, a support system. He was apparently staying at her place to help her feel safe, which, okay, fine. But again, I was the one paying for that place. I was the one covering the food he was eating, the electricity he was using. And still, I didn't question it. Monica checked her phone brand new, by the way, and said he'd be there soon, that he was just parking the car. I didn't even think about that at the time. Dinner went on, but I felt disconnected, like I was watching everything from a distance. I was there physically, but emotionally, I don't know. I felt invisible, like my role wasn't really to be part of the family, but to fund it. When we finished eating, my mom got up to grab dessert, her famous tiramisu, and I offered to clear the plates. She thanked me, called me a good girl, and that just, I don't know, it hit differently that night, because that's what I was, right? The good one. The responsible one. The one who fixes everything. So I gathered the plates, stacked them up, and walked into the kitchen. And at that point, I still thought I understood what was going on. I thought I knew my sister. I thought I knew my place in the family. I had no idea that everything I believed was about to completely fall apart. Okay, so here's where everything changed, like in a single moment. I was in the kitchen, just rinsing a glass, stacking dishes, trying to be invisible. The dinner had gone on, Mom happy, Monica playing her part, and I thought I was just doing my part, quietly. But then the back door creaked open. I froze. My heart skipped. And there they were, Monica and Derek, in the hallway, out of sight from anyone else, but close enough that I could hear everything. They were talking in whispers, but it wasn't soft. There was a sharpness to it, a glee, a cruelty. And then I heard it, Monica laughing. That laugh, it cut through me. "She has no idea we bought the BMW," she said. And Derek chuckled like it was the funniest thing in the world. Wait, my stomach just dropped, ice cold. My hand stopped moving, the water running over it feeling like freezing metal. My mind literally went blank for a second. Did she just... No, it can't be. My blood pressure spiked, my chest tightened. I could feel it physical, like a punch from the inside. Then Monica said, "Alice is so desperate for family. She'd pay for my manicures if I told her it was therapy. She has no idea we bought the BMW. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles turned white. The room felt like it had disappeared, except for their voices echoing around me, amplified, mocking. Every laugh, every word. It was like a knife twisting. All the months of working double shifts, paying rent, covering groceries, all of it gone. Or worse, used, weaponized against me. Derek's voice joined in, sneering. She thinks she's being the big noble sister. It's pathetic. How long do you think we can keep this gravy train rolling? Monica answered, almost gleefully. Forever, if I cry hard enough. Now come on, look sad. I need to ask her for next month's rent early. I want to book that weekend in Cabo. I couldn't process it. Wait. I'd been the TM, the silent pillar, the savior. And they were laughing at me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, but also betrayed in a way that burned straight through my chest. Not just the money, not just the lies. It was the contempt, the complete disregard for me as a person, for my effort, my care. They didn't just they despised me for giving. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I couldn't. The betrayal was so total, so sharp, that all I could do was stand there, frozen, trembling. I swallowed hard, trying to calm the wave of nausea rolling through me. My vision blurred, my ears rang slightly, but I forced myself to stay quiet. Not because I was afraid they had no power over me, but because I needed to think. I needed to feel it, really feel it, before I could act. Every detail came into focus. Derek, leaning casually against the wall, smirked like a predator confident in his prey. Monica, radiant and relaxed, like a queen in her palace, laughing at the person who literally kept her kingdom standing. It was surreal. It didn't even feel real. And yet it was. I could almost hear the background hum of the fridge, the faint ticking of a wall clock, my own heartbeat thudding in my ears, louder than anything else, and their words, the laughter, the casual cruelty. It was like a spotlight had suddenly been shown on the truth I hadn't wanted to see. They were using me. Every bit of care, every dollar, every sacrifice, it wasn't appreciated. It was fuel for their luxury, their amusement. I tried to process it logically, because otherwise, I'd lose it. I remembered every payment I'd made. Rent, utilities, groceries, therapy money, car repairs, all of it. 11 months, tens of thousands of dollars. And there they were, mocking the very sacrifices I had made, laughing over a new car I couldn't afford for myself and dinners I couldn't imagine treating myself to. My chest felt tight, but my mind began to click into this almost mechanical mode. The anger surged. Yes, but there was also clarity. I had been blind, and now I could see everything. They thought I was weak. They thought my kindness was a weakness to exploit. They were wrong. I wasn't just the generous sister anymore. I was aware. I was the one who could act. But first I had to survive the moment. First, I had to deal with the shock, the betrayal, the swirling mix of rage, disbelief, and hurt. I swallowed again, forced my hands to unclench just slightly, and leaned against the counter, pretending to be doing something innocuous while my mind ran over the scene again. Every word, every laugh, Every tiny bit of evidence I had been ignoring suddenly aligned in a way that made my blood boil. They didn't notice me. I was tucked in the alcove, unseen, unheard, but I could hear them plotting, laughing, mocking, and that realization that I'd been funding their lifestyle while being treated like a fool that broke something inside me. Not in the melodramatic, crying on the floor way I'd imagined in movies, but in a deep, cold, bone-deep way. It was the kind of hurt that made your hands tremble and your teeth clench at the same time. I remember thinking, wait, I can't believe this. How long have they been doing this? Months. 11 months. My money, my energy, my care, turned into their amusement and luxury. I could almost hear my dad's voice in my head, reminding me to protect Monica. And now that promise felt like a chain around my neck. But then another part of me snapped awake. The part that had been quiet, observant, calculating. The part that was trained to see patterns, to understand structures, to know where the support beams were. I could see the leverage they had assumed over me, and suddenly it became clear I still held the power. I just hadn't realized it yet. Monica laughed again. Derek added a snide comment about how I would never catch on. That part made me smile, slightly, a dangerous little smile, because it was the kind of smile you give right before you move the chess piece that wins the game. I turned off the tap finally, my hands ice cold but steady now. Silence filled the kitchen, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I felt a strange calm start to settle over me. Not peace, not yet, but clarity. I knew in that instant that everything had changed. They had made a fatal mistake. They assumed my kindness was weakness. They assumed they could laugh at me with impunity. And now, I was awake. I was aware. I was ready. The betrayal had cut deep, yes, but it had also lit a fire, a cold, precise fire that wasn't about revenge in a loud, dramatic way. It was about setting things right, about stopping the abuse of trust, the manipulation, the sheer audacity of taking advantage of love and family. And I would. But first, I needed to absorb it all, to let it sink in, every laugh, every word, every cruel little detail, and then I would act. I remember sitting in my apartment that night, just staring at my laptop, the blue light reflecting off my tired eyes. My hands were still trembling a little from what I'd overheard, but now it wasn't just shock. It was something else, something sharper. Anger. Yeah, but also clarity. And then the numbers started coming back to me. The rent, the utilities, groceries, the extra $600 a month for her therapy, the car repairs, the random payments I thought were for medicine or errands. I started typing them into a spreadsheet in my head, just running the sums quietly, as if the act of totaling it could somehow make sense of the betrayal. 11 months. Almost $35,000. $35,000 that I had poured into Monica's life, believing I was helping her survive, while she lived like she was on vacation. I could see it so clearly now. The BMW, the dinners out, the Bahamas trip. The absurdness of it hit me like a punch. My blood ran cold. Every single dollar, every ounce of energy I'd spent, it hadn't gone to survival. It had gone to luxury, to mocking me, to fueling a lifestyle she couldn't afford on her own. I leaned back in my chair, running my hands through my hair, trying to calm the storm of emotions. Betrayal doesn't even begin to cover it. It's one thing to be disappointed, to be hurt. But this was contempt, pure and unfiltered. They had taken my trust, my devotion, and turned it into a playground for their schemes. And I had been the unwitting sponsor. I remembered each time she called me, voice trembling, recounting some new disaster, some new expense. And I had paid every time, because that's what you do, right for family. Because of the promise to Dad, because even when it hurt, you hope that maybe the person you love could never do this to you. I had hoped, foolishly, but that hope was gone now, swept away in a tide of harsh reality. I can see the whole picture, every lie, every manipulation, every casual act of taking advantage. I thought back to the dinner, the way she'd laughed, the way Derek had sneered. It wasn't just casual spending, it was intentional. They had weaponized my care. I felt my chest tighten, and I breathed deeply, slowly, forcing my mind to focus. The numbers were just numbers, right? But they told a story. $35,000. That's rent for almost 3 years where I live. That's groceries for a small family. That's vacations, experiences, security. And they spent it like it was nothing. While I was meal prepping rice and beans because I couldn't afford to indulge myself the way I indulged them. I sat there, letting each realization sink in. And then something shifted. The fear, the shock, the heartbreak began to morph into something colder, sharper, determined. I realized I wasn't powerless. I wasn't just a victim of their manipulation. I had options, I had leverage, I had control. Because every payment, every lease agreement, every bank transfer, those were all under my name. I wasn't just the generous sister, I was the guarantor. I held the keys to the entire arrangement, and they had no idea. I started planning quietly, carefully, mentally mapping out each step. I couldn't just confront them yet. I needed to stop the flow of money first. Let the natural consequences take over. Cancel the recurring transfers. Stop funding the lifestyle that was mocking me. Every action had to be precise, deliberate, one wrong move. And I could look impulsive, weak, and I couldn't afford to look weak. I ran through the sequence in my mind. First, stop the rent transfer. Make sure there was no overlap, no loophole. Then the grocery stipend. Then the miscellaneous payments that had disguised indulgences as necessity. And keep it quiet. Absolutely no reaction. They couldn't know until it was too late. They had to learn the lesson of their own hubris. And I'd be watching, orchestrating everything from the shadows. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface. But now it was methodical, focused. I could feel the tightness in my chest ease slightly, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I would not let this continue. I would not be the one being taken advantage of while pretending everything was fine. I was done being the invisible provider, the unpaid caretaker, the silent fool. I thought about all the times I justified it, the guilt, the obligation, the sense of duty. And now, seeing the numbers, the evidence, I realized it wasn't duty anymore. It was theft, pure, unadulterated exploitation, and the rules had changed. I was no longer operating from love or hope or guilt. I was operating from clarity, and clarity, I knew, demanded action. I sat back, letting my thoughts settle into a quiet, deliberate plan. Cancel the transfers one by one, document everything, prepare for the moment of confrontation, but not yet. Let them believe they were still in control. Let them continue their arrogance a little longer, so the fall would be absolute when it came. I would act strategically, deliberately, each step calculated, and in that moment, I felt a strange sort of empowerment, not the kind you see in movies, where someone stands up dramatically. No, this was quieter, deeper, more precise. It was a satisfaction of finally seeing clearly, of understanding the dynamics at play, of knowing that the person they assumed was naive, weak, and endlessly giving had finally recognized the game, and now the rules had changed. I didn't feel relief yet, not entirely, but I felt awake, I felt present, and I felt ready. Ready to stop being the unwitting enabler, ready to reclaim my life, my money, my sense of self, ready to act, but with strategy, ready to let the consequences unfold naturally, without screaming, without confrontation, but with precision. I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and let the spreadsheet of my mind run one last time. $35,000, every penny accounted for, every indulgence, every luxury, every lie, mapped, cataloged, understood. And then, slowly, deliberately, I closed my laptop, not yet to act, but to pause, to prepare, to shift fully into the role I'd known I could play all along, the one in control, the one who would stop the bleeding, the one who would make sure kindness didn't become exploitation again. And just like that, the victim part of me started to fade. The strategist emerged, steady, focused, and unflinching. I wasn't going to react with anger. I wasn't going to beg for respect or understanding. I was going to act, calculated, cold, certain. And in that quiet, determined space, I knew the first move had already been made in my mind. The rest was just a matter of time. After that night in the kitchen, I knew I needed proof, hard evidence. I couldn't just rely on memory or gut feelings anymore. That would leave everything too open to interpretation. I started small, methodically. First, social media. Monica and Derek weren't exactly subtle. Derek, in particular, had this ego, constantly posting online. I realized, wait, I can actually see what they're up to if I just look carefully. So, I logged onto a burner account, no profile picture. Generic name, and I searched for him. His profile popped right up. Derek the Disruptor. And there it was, like a breadcrumb trail, a gold mine of information. Photos, captions, videos. Each one painted a picture of the life I'd been funding without realizing. There was the silver BMW parked in their driveway. Caption, new whip, hard work pays off. Hustle grind power couple, 2 weeks earlier. A table stacked with sushi and lobster at that fancy restaurant he had raved about. Caption, eating like kings because we manifest abundance. And scroll down a little further, a video of them on a boat in turquoise waters. Bahamas, the exact same week Monica had claimed she was hospitalized for migraines and needed my help for a specialist. My heart sank, but I felt something else too. A fire starting to grow, a sense of power I hadn't felt in months. I started taking screenshots, one by one, high resolution, careful not to miss any date stamps. Each one I labeled, like filing evidence in my own mental archive. It felt methodical, therapeutic, almost. There was something reassuring about capturing the truth, freezing it in pixels and text, because now it couldn't just be denied. I could hold it, examine it, and later, show it. Next, I moved to banking records. I logged into my own accounts, pulled up every transaction I'd made on Monica's behalf. Rent, utilities, grocery stipends, random payments for therapy or car repairs. I stared at the numbers, typing them into a spreadsheet, comparing the dates with the social media evidence. Oh, wow. Just look at this. The overlap was unmistakable. When she said she needed $2,000 for a migraine specialist, that was the exact week they were in the Bahamas. The math, the timing, it all lined up perfectly. I could feel my chest tighten again, but this time it wasn't just shock or heartbreak. It was clarity, a sense of seeing everything for the first time. Then there were the other breadcrumbs, smaller, subtler things. Venmo transfers labeled as miscellaneous expenses. Little bits of money here and there that I'd assumed were legitimate. Car repairs, medicine, small luxuries, except now, thanks to the photos and the timeline I had reconstructed, I realized these were part of a pattern. I could see it, like a map. Each transaction, a marker. Each post on social media, another piece of the puzzle. And the puzzle didn't look good for them. But I didn't stop there. Derek had bragged about his investments before, particularly in crypto, which meant some of his accounts and activity could be public. So, I searched the popular forums he frequented. I created a separate browser session and dug through posts under his username. Bingo. There it was. A post bragging about securing a steady stream of funding from an angel investor, aka from my bank account. He literally called me the dumb sister funding his lifestyle. My jaw dropped. I felt like laughing and crying at the same time. And that was the smoking gun. Premeditation, malice, nothing accidental about this. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they had counted on me not seeing it. I kept everything organized, careful, screenshots saved with file names, posts printed on the office plotter. I wasn't frantic or hysterical. Not this time. I moved deliberately, calmly, like someone assembling the pieces of a chessboard before the game begins. Each piece of evidence made me feel stronger, more in control. The fear, the hurt, the betrayal, they were still there, simmering beneath the surface, but now they were tempered by strategy. I was no longer just reacting emotionally. I was observing, preparing, calculating. There were moments when I had to pause, when the reality of it all hit me like a physical weight. The audacity, the laughter, the sense of entitlement, that BMW, the lobster dinners, the Bahamas, the manipulation of my care, my devotion, my trust. And yet, even as my stomach churned with anger and disbelief, I kept going, moving through the evidence one careful step at a time. Each screenshot, each printout, each comparison between dates and transactions built a story I could finally hold in my hands, that I could show to anyone if needed. It was almost exhilarating in a way I didn't expect. I felt powerful because I was methodical, precise. I wasn't just a sister being taken advantage of. I was a strategist now, a planner. Every click of the mouse, every printout, every labeled screenshot, every cross-referenced transaction, it was all deliberate. And I felt in charge for the first time in months, maybe years. I wasn't being manipulated. I was setting the stage, laying the foundation for action, and it felt satisfying. I remember sitting back, looking at the binder I was assembling, feeling the weight of it in my hands. Not just the physical heft of the paper, but the gravity of the truth it contained. Every lie, every act of contempt, every detail meticulously recorded. And with each page I turned, I felt my resolve harden. I wasn't going to act impulsively. I wasn't going to confront them in anger or let my emotions dictate the moves. No, this was about precision, about control, about finally reclaiming the narrative that had been stolen from me. And so, I spent that night methodically gathering, organizing, labeling, and reflecting social media posts, banking records, forum threads, all of it painted the same picture: manipulation, exploitation, contempt. And I, for once, wasn't the pawn. I was the player. I could see it all laid out before me in clear, undeniable evidence. And the feeling of empowerment that came with that clarity, it was intoxicating. Not in a bragging way, but in a calm, steady, focused way. I could breathe, I could plan, and I could wait. By the time I finally leaned back in my chair, my hands no longer shaking, I knew something fundamental had changed. The fear, the heartbreak, the betrayal, they were still there, yes, but they were now tempered by control, by preparation, by the knowledge that I had the tools, the evidence, and the strategy to finally shift the balance of power. And that, more than anything, felt like taking a deep, cleansing breath after holding it underwater for far too long. I was ready. The confrontation would come, but on my terms, with facts in hand, calm in my voice, and nothing left to chance. Once I had everything organized, the screenshots, the banking records, the forum posts, I knew it was time to act, but carefully. I couldn't just storm in or react impulsively. No, this needed to be methodical. First, the money flow had to stop. I logged into the online banking and canceled the recurring rent transfer. Delete, confirm, then the grocery stipend. Delete, confirm. Each click felt small, almost insignificant, but inside, it was like detonating a bomb. I leaned back and breathed slowly. The trap was set. Next, I had to think about my mom. She was well-meaning, but stubborn. She could easily slip Monica a few $100s out of compassion, and that would ruin everything. So I called her early evening. "Mom," I said calmly, "I need you to trust me. Monica isn't broke. She's been spending the money on things you wouldn't expect. Please, don't give her any money right now." There was a pause. I could almost hear her hesitation through the line. I knew she wanted to believe the best, to see Monica as the innocent victim. "Okay, Alice," she finally said. "I won't send anything yet." That one word "yet" was dangerous, but I had a plan. Timing was everything. Meanwhile, the suspense built. I imagined Monica noticing the canceled payments. The moment she realized her supply line had dried up. The moment of panic. And, of course, she would try to spin it, to call, to manipulate, to threaten, but I was prepared. I let it play out in my head, anticipating every possible reaction, each text, each call, each desperate message. I was ready, calm, cold, strategic. I contacted the landlord next, Mr. Henderson. He was old school, reliable, and liked me because I'd always paid on time. "Alice," he said warmly. "Everything all right," I explained, calmly and professionally, that I was terminating my role as the lease guarantor and payer. If Monica and Derek wanted to stay, they'd have to sign a new lease under their own names and credit. I could hear the pause on the other end. I reassured him, steady and unflinching. "Please proceed with the standard procedure for non-payment," I said. That moment was electric. Even though my voice was calm, I knew the consequences were about to ripple outward. Monica would panic, Derek would panic, my mom would worry, and all I had to do was wait, observe, and let the natural consequences take their course. The anticipation wasn't nerve-wracking. Surprisingly, it was exhilarating. I had shifted from being a victim to the one controlling the board. I spent the next hours in a quiet, deliberate state. I watched for texts, calls, updates from the landlord, but I didn't react impulsively. Every message from Monica escalated from confusion to panic to aggression. "Alice, you can't do this," she wrote. "Mom is asking why I'm crying." And through it all, I stayed calm, detached, even. I wasn't responding to the emotional chaos. I was observing, noting, preparing. Timing and patience were my allies. And then there was a subtle thrill knowing that every move I'd made, the canceled transfers, the landlord notification, the call to Mom, was forcing the truth to emerge naturally. They had counted on my kindness, my silence, my obligation. They had assumed I would always be the enabler, the invisible provider. But now the leverage had shifted. I was no longer reactive. I was deliberate, calculated. The waiting game was tense. Yes, but it was mine. Every second built toward the moment where the consequences would land exactly where they should. And I would be ready for it. Every step controlled, every emotion harnessed. Sunday arrived, gray and ominous. The kind of day where the clouds feel like they're pressing down on you. I drove to Mom's house with the binder on the passenger seat. It wasn't heavy, not physically, but the weight of what was inside, every screenshot, every bank statement, every forum post, felt like a loaded weapon. Monica's car wasn't there, but I knew she had parked the BMW around the block. Classic. I walked in, and the atmosphere hit me immediately. Mom was pale, teary-eyed, trying to smile. Monica was at the kitchen table, clutching a tissue, her eyes red and puffy, like she'd been crying and screaming in equal measure. Derek was standing behind her, posture stiff, chest puffed out, acting like a protector. But I could see the tension in his eyes. They didn't know I had all the proof, and they were about to find out just how wrong their assumptions about me had been. Mom's voice trembled. "Alice, please, we need to stop this fighting. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't let my emotions dictate the moment." Calmly, I said, "I agree. We need to stop the lies." Monica's voice snapped back immediately, high-pitched and defensive. "The only one lying is you." She jumped to her feet, standing like a caged animal. The tissues crumpled in her hand. Her panic was palpable, but it didn't intimidate me. I set my bag down on the counter, leaned against it slightly, and calmly opened the binder. Derek stepped forward, trying to assert himself, but I looked him directly in the eyes. "Derek," I said, quiet but firm, "unless you want me to read your forum posts about your angel investor out loud to the police, I suggest you sit down and shut up." He froze, eyes darting side to side. I could see the realization hit him. This wasn't just about Monica. This was about the truth, the evidence, the undeniable reality. Slowly, hesitantly, he sank back into the chair behind Monica. I turned my attention to my mother. "Mom, I know you want to believe Monica," I said gently, but without wavering. "I know it hurts to think she would use us, but you need to look at this." I flipped the binder open to the first page, a high-resolution photo of Monica and Derek in the Bahamas. Date stamped last month, the same week Monica claimed she was in the hospital. Mom's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't speak. She kept looking from the photo to me, trying to process. "Mom, this is proof?" I continued, flipping to the next page, the invoice for the BMW 5 Series. I called the dealership. They confirmed the sale. I watched her reaction carefully, her lips pressed together, her eyebrows knitting in confusion. Monica gasped, voice cracking. That's an old photo from years ago. I didn't hesitate. I flipped the page to show the next piece of evidence, the forum post where Derek bragged about using my money for his crypto investments. The words were clear. Dumb sister, living rent-free is the ultimate hack. Mom's face went pale. Her eyes darted from the screen to Derek and then to Monica. The denial in her expression began to crack. I let a pause hang in the air, letting the evidence speak louder than any words I could say. Monica lunged toward the binder, hands outstretched, desperation in every motion. "She's photoshopping them," she shrieked. "It's not real. You're obsessed. Alice, you're stalking me." I calmly flipped the binder away from her reach, keeping my tone level, cold, precise. "Mom, listen, she isn't broke. They're spending my rent money on luxury goods. They are laughing at us." "I heard them," Monica screamed, her voice high and frantic. "You're lying. She's jealous. Dad loved me more." I ignored the jab. Dad wasn't here anymore, and neither was my money. I turned back to the binder, calmly flipping to the final page. The forum post stared back at us, Derek admitting to using the money, calling me the dumb sister. Mom read the words silently, her lips moving, absorbing the truth. Monica's eyes darted around, searching for a lifeline, for a savior to jump in and save her. Derek looked down at his shoes, calculating his own exit strategy. Mom whispered, almost to herself, "Monica, Did you really say that I never said that?" Monica cried, eyes wide, darting frantically from one face to another, but her voice lacked conviction. The room was quiet except for the hum of tension. I spoke steadily. "We heard you, Monica. At the last dinner in the kitchen, you laughed about it. Every single word. The evidence was overwhelming. Photos, bank statements, forum posts. It wasn't subjective anymore. Monica's manipulations, lies, and contempt were laid bare in front of everyone. She looked at Derek, waiting for him to save her. But he didn't. He had no defense, no clever maneuver to undo what was clearly documented. "Mom," Monica pleaded one last time, her voice small, wavering. "Please." I closed the binder gently, placed it on the counter, and looked at her with unflinching calm. "Selling the BMW is your first step. You have 3 days before the pay or quit notice expires. After that, consequences?" Her lips trembled, her face a mixture of panic and disbelief. Derek remained silent, slouched, defeated. Mom's eyes glistened with the realization of the truth, the heartbreak mixing with clarity. The room was thick with tension, every heartbeat audible, every breath measured. Monica tried to argue, tried to rationalize, but the narrative she had spun for months collapsed in real time. Every excuse, every lie, every attempt to manipulate the story fell flat. The truth had weight, it had presence, and it was undeniable. I watched as the panic set in fully, as the reality of their choices and deceit hit them squarely. For the first time, They were facing the consequences of their actions, not in anger, not in shouting, but in the undeniable and factual weight of evidence laid bare. I stayed calm, steady, every word deliberate, every pause, every slight gesture reinforced that I was in control. The room had shifted, the power dynamics reversed. They assumed I was weak, that my kindness would always be exploited. Now, they were confronted with a reality they hadn't anticipated, and I, Alice, had orchestrated it all. The confrontation wasn't dramatic or violent. It was precise, measured, and completely devastating for them. In the silence that followed, I watched as Monica and Derek processed the fallout. She shrank into her chair, defeated. He avoided eye contact. Mom exhaled slowly, her expression torn, heartbreak and relief intertwined. The climax wasn't a shout, a fight, or a scream. It was the quiet, inescapable implosion of the lies, the manipulation, and the betrayal that had dominated the past year. And I had guided it to its conclusion, calm, cold, and unshakable. After that confrontation, the eviction process moved quickly. I stayed firm. I didn't pay a cent, and the landlord followed through. Monica and Derek had to leave. I heard later that Derek drove off with the BMW and the laptop, probably looking for his next mark. Monica, soaked in reality, spent a couple of weeks in a shelter before moving into a small studio apartment in a rougher part of town. She had to work, pay rent, face the life she had avoided for months. Life for me, meanwhile, started to breathe again. The weight I'd carried, the invisible burden of supporting her, covering for her mistakes, absorbing her lies, was finally lifting. The apartment, quiet, felt like home again. I could sleep at night without anxiety gnawing at the edges. I finally bought a new sofa. I booked the Italy trip I had dreamed about for 5 years. Simple things that had been postponed, sacrificed, postponed again, all because I put someone else first. But now it was my turn. Mom and I grew closer in a way that felt real. No pretending, no covering for Monica, no keeping up appearances. Sunday dinners resumed, just the two of us, talking about life honestly, laughing, sometimes quietly sipping our wine and just being present. The tension that had existed for years was gone, replaced by a grounded, steady connection, one built on truth rather than illusions. And then, months later, a letter arrived in the mail from Monica. No return address. Inside was a check for $50, along with a note. It wasn't much against the $35,000 I had spent, but it was a start. The first honest, unmanipulated acknowledgement I had ever received from her. I didn't cash it. I framed it and put it in my home office, not as a trophy, not as a victory, but as a reminder. A reminder that I was not a bank, I was not a doormat, I was not stupid. I was Alice, and for the first time, I was free. Freedom didn't feel flashy. It was quiet. It was heavy. In the good way, the kind of weight that tells you you're finally standing on solid ground, without someone else siphoning your energy or controlling your life. And the silence that followed the chaos was, honestly, restorative. I could think, breathe, and focus on myself and Mom, on the life I had earned through patience, endurance, and, yes, strategy. Looking back, it's strange how betrayal and liberation can be so intertwined. The pain was real, the deception sharp, but the lessons were invaluable. I learned how to stand firm, to observe, to plan, and to act when it mattered most. I learned that kindness has limits, but justice doesn't. And I learned that sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to acknowledge the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be. So that's the story. It's not glamorous, it's not clean, but it's real. And sometimes reality is stranger and harsher than fiction, but it's also where growth, clarity, and freedom can be found. If you've ever been in a situation where someone exploited your kindness, maybe there's a takeaway here for you too. Thanks for listening. If this story resonated, maybe consider giving it a like or subscribing so you won't miss the next one. And hey, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments. It's always amazing to see how far these stories